Good afternoon and welcome to the final panel in the auditorium. This will be talking about the right to the smart cities. This will be moderated by Vera Vidal, a researcher at University, and she'll be welcomed and joined by a panel. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Please come join us at the closing session of the Smart City Expo World Congress. We're very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for being here because it's been 3 very intense days where we covered a lot of topic. I'm sure that you've been able to hear a lot about digital transformation, urban environment, mobility, governance and finance, and inclusive and sharing cities. And to conclude, the very interesting, inspirational talks you've been able to listen to so far, we have a special panel on the right to the smart city. That was the topic picked by the City Hall of Barcelona to be present this year at the Smart City Expo. So this afternoon we have with us first Mr. David Brother, who's the mayor's advisor on cross-section strategy against gentrification for the City Hall of Barcelona and an architect. David, can you tell us a bit more about what you do?
Yes, as you were saying, I advise the Mayor of Barcelona in the implementation of this cross-section strategy, which is connected with different departments. As we know, all city councils work in very enclosed departments, and I'm trying to connect them in order to build up these answers against the gentrification processes that are affecting our central neighborhoods, meaning departments as housing department, the commerce department, the urban planning department, and all that stuff.
Thank you very much. We also have Murray Cox, founder of Inside Airbnb.
So I'm a data activist. I collect data on Airbnb around the world in more than 100 different cities. I make it available freely so cities can understand the problem and the impact of Airbnb. I also provide tools so you can visualize how Airbnb is being really used in cities.
Thanks. We then have Professor Mayo Fuster Morell, who's the director of the Demons Research Group at the Internet Interdisciplinary Institute at WAC, and also one of the co-organizer of the Sharing City Summit.
Hello everyone, very happy to be here. Thank you for the organization for inviting me. So my main work is directing a research group, and what I try to do with it is to try to see how the situation that is being generated by the opportunities opened up by the new technologies can bring into transform the research itself through a research-oriented type of work and research that inform processes of organization, policies, like in the case of the Sharing City Summit, or also technological design, and try to work always based on open knowledge and open approaches to and collaborative approaches to knowledge production, trying to transform the university as a knowledge institution for the new for this century, and put universities to work and to take advantage of the opportunities that we have now.
Thanks. And last we have with us Samir Hassan, who is Associate Professor at Universidad Complutense of Madrid.
Yes, and I also have my own research group there, where we try to combine social research with computer science research, trying to study collaborative communities on the broad collaborative economy, try to understand their needs, and build tools using open source and decentralized technologies in order to facilitate their work and have research with some social impact.
Thank you. So as we were saying, today's topic is the right to the smart city, and especially can ICTs contribute to the democratization of the city? And we've seen a lot that when it comes to the smart cities, it seems that the agenda has been pushed by the corporations that are actually trying to sell the sensors and technologies to the cities itself, and that it can often be a very techno-centered vision of the city, leaving very little room to the polis, the actual politics. So could you tell us a bit more about what you see as the main challenges of the implementation of ICTs for the city? And maybe.
Yeah, sure. I think that today nobody dares to deny the deep impact that ICTs can have in the way in which we use our urban spaces on a daily basis. I think that there are three main fields which are deeply affecting our way in which we live in our cities, meaning big data collection, which is concentrating a lot of information in the hands of a few, and which gives them a lot of power. This can be a big problem which we have to tackle with. Secondly, we have the multiplication of devices, of the Internet of Things, and the smartphones we have in our pockets, which are also, but not only smartphones, but more and more vehicles or domotic devices that we have at home, etc., which have also a deep impact in the city. And also, of course, we have this disruption of algorithms which are thinking much faster than we do, and which are more and more deciding things which affect deeply our lives. For example, how Blackstone company buys properties in the global cities in a few seconds, or how autonomous vehicles are taking decisions on what to do when a pedestrian is crossing the street. So this means that we are facing huge challenges in domains as mobility, in domains as housing, in domains as marketplaces, the places in which we earn or spend money, and also in the agora in which we decide together what will we do in our futures in common.
Thanks. Murray, any thoughts?
Well, my main focus of work are on internet platforms, and specifically platforms like short-term rental platforms, Airbnb, that are impacting social resources in the city, namely housing. And I think in places like Barcelona and many other cities around the world, we understand the pressure on housing, finding places to live for the people that live in the city, places for residents and workers in the city. And these internet platforms, sometimes the impact is invisible, people being displaced. The internet platforms anonymize their location, so it's very difficult to find. And there's, and I think in many cases the laws that govern these issues, sometimes they're local laws, regional laws, national laws, and in the case of Europe, European laws. So the impact is, in many cases, far away from where the legislation is happening. So I think there are challenges. These platforms are in many cases multinationals. So there's lobbying that's happening at all of those levels, all four levels. And again, it's hard for activists, community groups, politicians, administrators to match this multi-million-dollar lobbying campaigns. I think also these platforms don't give out data. So in the first steps of trying to respond, of understanding the impact, there's no data that's available. And so I think there are some of the challenges with technology.
Thanks. Mayo?
The first thing I would say is that in the question about what type of challenges and impacts the new technologies have on the city, first I would think about which approach to technology, no? And I would avoid visions of technology as a tool, like a kind of a hammer, in which you know for what is useful for, because it has been designed for something and you use it and it has an impact. But more think about technology as bringing a new country, in the sense of with new type of rules, with new organizational logics, in which particularly the reductions of cost of transaction for the collective action that the new technologies is bringing, the cost of getting to know other people, getting to identify people with your same interests, coordinate with them and produce with them, has been reduced. And so this has favored certain organizational logics, like more open, more decentralized, and has made more difficult other type of more central or closed dynamics of production. And this can have very ambivalent consequences, both bringing positive kind of bringing opportunities as well as challenges. That would be my first reaction. Then I would like to answer this question on the base of the experience of the organizing of the Sharing City Summit, which has been a sitting concert between 50 cities that had met here one day before the Smart City Congress and during the Congress. There has come cities from all continents, from like New York, Amsterdam, Paris, Seoul, of course, Barcelona as hoster of the event. And we have been debating in the topic about inclusive and sharing city, and there is also a stand on sharing as part of the expo. And the goal of the Sharing City Summit was about addressing the challenges and opportunities of the platform economy, referred platform economy by the emerging form of production mediated by digital platforms, no? And here it emerged as main challenge the disruption of certain modalities of platform economy, like in the cases of Airbnb or Uber or Glovo or Deliveroo, which tend to they generate disruptions into the right to the city in general terms, because they can impact into certain commons of the city, like the commons around housing, the possibility of accessing housing, or the commons about environmental quality of the air if they contribute to increase pollution because of car use, no? So they might they disrupt the right to the city in taking an extractionist approach to commons in the city, but they also disrupt specific rights of the citizens, like the working rights when the models of like Uber or Glovo bring a more precarious conditions of who is engaging into these platforms. Or they might impact also specific rights, like housing right in the case of the impact of the in terms of generating gentrification in the case of models like Airbnb or other type of platforms of vacational rental. So I would point about the disruptive models of platform economy as impacting the right to the city and the city as a commons in itself, and the certain basic elements that we need, like as I say, quality of air or access to very specific needs around basic conditions required for living in the city, but also focus into specific rights that are being very hard to achieve, and now we are seeing them in damage. And the cities has created a common front in order to together confront these big platforms and the power they have in the city, and in order to collaboratively has a common front in negotiating with them for access, for example, of the data or of how they operate in the city, or also lobbying the European Commission for assuring a regulation that favor that the cities can access the data or can have a voice in defining what's the rule. And that should not be seen as some kind of attack to the platforms, but the defense of the city sovereignty in governing the cities, and also think about like I like the metaphor of the traffic light. I mean, when the innovation around the car arrives to the cities, it's not that you are against innovation because you put traffic lights or you put the bell, you know. It's at a certain point, a very big transformation, you need to intervene in order to make an equilibrium with the living in the city. So in this moment, we need traffic lights for the disruptive impact of the platform economy, and this is what the cities are trying to do, and it's also favor innovation when you make clear which are the rules of operating in the city, because if Amsterdam has certain rules regarding these platforms and Seoul or New York has others, it's not easy for this, for innovating or for promoting the platform scalability. So it's also in favor of the market to make sure all the cities has a common basic standards about how this platform should operate in the city.
Summer?
So following up on the issues of the platform economy that Mayo was talking about, I would like to zoom out a bit and think about the infrastructure of these platforms, of which platforms are we talking about and how they operate because of certain structures that they have. So we have these famous platforms that we are more every day using more and more, the citizens in every city, right? Platforms that deal with hundreds of thousands or millions of users, and they have every citizen is interacting with the same software, hosted in the same servers, in the same hardware and software infrastructure that these owners of the infrastructure have, these service providers that have built this fancy software that we all use, being Airbnb or Uber or whatever we mentioned. And in the end, just the running costs of these platforms, that's just the massive scale that they have, it's very expensive for them. So they tend to be forced to monetize as much as they can. And what do they use to monetize? Typically our data, right? So in the end, in the platform economy, we are used to seeing how surveillance is their business model, how surveillance has turned into the business model of the internet. And this is, they excuse themselves because they are providing this value, that is this software, and that it has huge running cost, this very large scale, servers, etc. This implies that there is a huge difference of power between those owners of infrastructure and the communities that they serve. So the governance is highly concentrated here. Doesn't matter how many scandals Uber suffers, the citizens have no impact whatsoever in the governance of these platforms. Doesn't matter how Airbnb hosts may not like this new feature that Airbnb has, but doesn't matter. Airbnb has a practical monopoly over the situation because the internet, decentralized internet that we are all using creates winner-takes-all markets in which the first that reaches critical mass covers the biggest share of the market, which is a practical monopoly. And then this difference of power, this difference of governance derives in a very different distribution of profits. The value is concentrated in the owners of the infrastructure, and the citizens have either nothing or just some leftovers that the platforms leave them in order for it to operate. So these problems of having a centralized infrastructure and therefore a centralized governance and centralized profits is how the platform economy is built today, and hopefully later we can talk about solutions that are on the table in order to address this.
Well, let's open second round about that, as you're pointing out. So what do you see as opportunities? Does it depend on the different models of governance and how the platforms are designed? Does it depend on who is actually behind, if it's the city or the citizens directly that are behind ICTs? What do you see as opportunities of ICTs for the right and for the city?
Yes, I think this is a very good question because we cannot rest in the technophobic approach against new technologies. We must overcome this panic and try to see how these tools can be useful in order to defend the right to the city in several fields. As for example, we could talk about the 4 fields I was proposing before. In terms of housing, we cannot accept that every new technology is good for the right to housing, because this is not true. It will not be good if we trust in hyper-technological houses in a sprawling city which wastes a lot of energy, for example. We have to come back to the compact and mixed city, but we can use, for example, big data collected by mobile phone companies in order to measure the use of the different uses of the urban space, as for example, knowing in real time which is the proportion of tourists and neighbors in a very block of a neighborhood. So we can tackle with this proportion and defend the right to the city using this data. No? In terms of mobility, the same. We cannot trust on hyper-technified cars which will drive alone for us, because it's, again, a question of who owns the infrastructure. If we replace the public transit system by new corporations that have all the means of mobility, this will create a problem of abuse of power again. But again, we can use new technologies in order to let people know which bus is better to know from A to B, or in order to improve the intermodality of bicycle, public transport, etc. The same for marketplaces. We are questioning how a new useless class is appearing. Many people fear to lose their jobs because of the disruption of new technologies. But at the same time, maybe we can overcome the 20th century model of big commercial malls and empower little shops in our neighborhoods by means of these new technologies. No? And the same thing for the political agora. We have seen how, for example, Facebook has appeared in some elections like Brexit or the United States electoral campaign, but at the same time we have new tools that foster the participation of people, like for example in Barcelona, the implementation of this platform called The City in Barcelona, Let's Decide Barcelona, which is also a way of improving the way in which people are discussing and taking decisions together.
All right.
So in the case of the challenges of short-term rentals and the impact on housing, from my point of view, data is key. In terms of identifying the impacts in the beginning so that we're aware that we have to do something about it, that something's happening to our commons, housing commons, human rights to shelter in our city. Something's going against our vision of the city, our collective vision. And so data is key these days in terms of understanding that. And so there are ways of addressing that. Companies could give cities data where they impact with those commons or impact with consumers. There could be a framework of a minimal level of data that protects corporates, their corporates' private data. but it allows municipalities to measure impacts that are important, that's the domain of the city to protect those assets. In some cases, people like me could come along and provide data if it's possible to get it, for example, by scraping a website and providing it into open source. There's many ways that cities could also make it easier, their own internal data, so that researchers can match these services with housing data, rental data, things like that, displacement, so that you can form good policy. Many cities are permitting or requiring licenses for this activity, and I think there's a role that technology can play, integrating with these platforms to see whether the activity is allowed in enforcing compliance. I think there can also be data sharing among cities so that we can all have a common understanding that this is a regional issue. And in the case of the Sharing Cities Alliance, that you could, it can help to form alliances amongst the cities in either sharing knowledge, which could be by technology, so sharing similar regulations, similar impacts, and also coming up with a shared strategy. So there are some of the ways that technology can be used to regulate and control the impacts of some of these services.
Thanks. Mayo?
Okay. I will address the question of the opportunities also from the experience that we had with the Sharing Cities Summit in how cities has also wanted to embrace the opportunities opened up by the platform economy, in the sense of, as I say, it's a matter of organizing the traffic. It's a matter of organizing the excesses of certain impacts, but platform economy can bring many opportunities from the perspective of growth, of economical development, and a model of economical development based on collaboration and openness. Here, as they are, one element that was very present in the summit is the necessity to differentiate those models which doesn't have qualities which go in line with the interests of the cities, in contrast to those models which actually they support the interests of the city. And criteria that has been very present is the question that those models which favor a governance, as Summer was pointed to, a governance which is participative, no? That the community of people which interact in these platforms has some certain control. There is a power distribution that favor a participative governance modality, that also the economical model is fair in terms of payments, in terms of taxation, in terms of a model of distribution of the economical value generated, which is fair with the production that there has been behind. If there is qualities of the platform regarding supporting open source type of program or software, or they are based on open data, the implication for the dynamics of power that are being established in the platform are very different. So those platforms which are, in terms of governance, more participative, in terms of economic, more fair, and in terms of technology, favor more openness, transparency, privacy. And finally, regarding the type of impact they generate, if they are more responsible to assure that these communities are inclusive, that they don't discriminate, that they are environmentally sensitive, and that they favor environmental impact, and they are respectful with local regulations. No? When these qualities are present, those are a type of mode of production which can be tremendously positive for the economical development of the city, and bring an scalability of economical democratization, which we have never known before. the city of Barcelona, the 9% of the GDP is based on social economy. Here we have a long tradition of cooperativism. In Bologna it's 30%. In Melbourne is even larger than 50%. So a more democratic modes of production is not an utopia. It's a reality. There are models, running models. And if what the opportunity brings the platform economy is bring these models from the 9% of the GDP in Barcelona to perhaps arrive to the 20 or 30%. No, they can scale enormously a mode of production collaborative-based and more democratic settings. No, cases like Smart Bid that has been presented also in the inclusive tag. Topic, which is a cooperative of freelance in the cultural sectors that they use the platform to offer their services, and they mutualize their necessities, like the platform anticipate payments or provide infrastructure required for them to operate. And there is 2,000 people, when we have known the creation of a cooperative of this dimension. And there is also the case of Wikilog, which was started here in Barcelona, which provides services worldwide. It's an international global platform provider on routes for in the mountains of exchange of knowledge. So you have this kind of democratic modes of production supported by platforms and in a scale that we didn't knew before. That's the first element. There is also another great possibility of reducing consumption with collaborative consumption, not buying things, not producing new things, but to reuse and utilize resources or to maximize the collaborative use of existing infrastructure instead of producing more. I would like to say that in gender there would be an opportunity, but sadly this is not the case. Even also in terms of the more open kind of models of or more collaborative models of platform production, they also neither perform well on gender. So here we still could not say in terms of an opportunity for reducing gender gap, and the element of being in the economical sector and ICT sector altogether is not favoring this, so there is a lot of work to do here. But beyond these opportunities in the economical sphere of democratization of the economy and bringing economical activity into the cities, I would like to also refer to how far the collaborative model of platform economy can also transform how cities as public administration operate. So there is this approach of think about a collaborative politics for the collaborative economy, and in this sense there has been cities participating in the summit that they are already incorporating participative collaborative dynamics in the way they decide on the policies of the platform economy. This is the case of, for example, Barcelona, or the case of Milan. And here is emerging a very interesting framework of thinking a democratic innovation and public innovation of government institutions that go beyond to the framework of participative democracy. So here it's not about participative democracy like in the case of public budgeting, or in the case of having more sources or voting more frequently, or giving your opinion. It goes beyond. It's not only like citizens providing their opinion in a collaborative manner to the administration, but we are in front of a possibility of involvement of the citizens in the implementation of the policies, in doing the policies, in managing the policies for assuring certain services, no? And in here, I like to talk about the framework of this type of involvement, participative involvement of city production, in terms of commons public partnership, in which the public administration provide the infrastructure for the provision of services, and citizens inject in this provision. There is the case of match funding, for example, in Barcelona is doing, which is based on it's a call for funding for entrepreneurship in this sector, in which is being used a crowdfunding platform called Goteo, in which if you are able to raise funding for your project, like 2,000 euros through Goteo, the city council double that. No? So there is a matching the dynamic of the public administration and with a collaborative dynamic. Or there is also the case of mobility as a service, as incorporating collaborative dynamic of exchange of sharing of cars or sharing or bike between citizens in order to make arrive the public transportation where the underground, for example, doesn't arrive. If the underground doesn't arrive, then you can inject into providing platforms that allow the citizens to collaborate between them to assure the services. No? Here in Barcelona, we have a cooperative, it's called Mobilidad, which actually does this type of collaborative uses of environmentally friendly type of cars, bicycles, and motorbikes, and it's exploring how to integrate it into the mobility policies of the city. So think about also the great opportunity of bringing collaboration into the administration, and if in the economical sector we see a great transformation by the ICT into collaborative modalities and platform-based modalities, this can also be transform the administration to a kind of a platform of collaboration and organize the provision of the policies and the service in a more open and collaborative manner, in which citizens not only give their opinion but also inject into the organizing of it.
Thanks, Mayo. Samit?
So our research group is working nowadays in how to facilitate this type of cooperative platforms that are already out there, like Mayo was saying. So how can we build infrastructure that inherently facilitates, inherently impedes that there is a sole owner of the infrastructure, so there cannot be one overlord controlling all the interactions that are happening, where the governance of these platforms is democratic, so it's the users who decide how the software platforms evolve, and not those owners of infrastructure. And how we can experiment with new economic models in which the profit and the value generated in these platforms is distributed among the users that are creating the value in practice. In order to deal with these challenges, we are using blockchain. I know that when someone mentions blockchain, certain associations come to everybody's head, mostly Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and new markets. Fortunately, blockchain is a technology that can be used for much more than that. In practice, when we think of a software platform, we know that this is being running on a server. A server is basically a computer that is 24 hours running, that has storage and computation. So it has your data and it computes some instructions. So when I want to operate something in Airbnb, I want to search for a new house, it hosts the data of the list of the listings, and it executes the instructions to search for what I wanted. We can have this storage and computation in a distributed manner with decentralized technologies. This data can be distributed, and the computation can be also distributed in a network. Blockchain is just a way of doing that, where the data is in every user's computer, and the operations, the instructions, are executed by the whole network. This means that when we put code on the blockchain, there is no server. There is no single owner of the infrastructure. There is no one that can just unplug it. This means that Bitcoin is just an application of that. Bitcoin is just a service that is providing you a currency in order to exchange a token that can be exchanged among peers. But we can do much more than that. We can, for example, if we wanted to create an association between all of us, we would need to agree on some bylaws, on some rules, a legal document that has some bylaws, and that would define the interactions among all of us. We would decide how do we take decisions, what's the hierarchy, or what is the governance model that we are all following. These bylaws, we can record them in code. We can write code that has these rules and put it on the blockchain. That means that we would have an organization, what we call a decentralized autonomous organization, that defines that intermediates our interaction, defines what are the rules that we are all interacting with each other with. And we together can decide what are the rules that govern us, how this code will evolve. That means that we can create ecosystems in which software operates in a distributed manner, providing services like Airbnb or like other services, but governed by the users. It facilitates a cooperative governance of these services. It facilitates, there is no these huge servers controlled by an owner of the infrastructure that has very high running costs. This doesn't exist here. So basically the profit generated can be distributed by those using those services. It provides an alternative infrastructures, alternative ways of approaching the technology that we are used to through these fancy decentralized technologies that provide new software platforms. Can we connect this with these beautiful ecosystems that are being born today in Barcelona and in other places? Well, this is what we are hopefully working on and eventually in a few years hope to realize.
Thank you very much. Do we have time for any questions from the audience? If there are any? Yes, I see one there. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Carlos Betancourt. Summarizing your discussion, if you allow me to do that, I get a feeling that the problem is not only that there is not a right to the smart city, but that the way in which the smart city is being built is wrong, and that there is a need for alternative approaches to build a smart city. And I'm wondering if you have thought about it. The second question is that the concept of the smart city itself, the way we use it, seems to be wrong as well. Because it assumes that there is something called a stupid city. But they are not stupid cities. That thing that the smart city in an implicit fashion calls a stupid city is quite smart. And somehow we're making a division there between being digital and being connected and being smart, and not being connected and not being digital and being stupid. And I think that division, which is very exclusionary, should be questioned. And I'm wondering if you guys have had the time to think about that.
Thank you for your question. David, do you want to answer?
Yes, I do agree with you. I think that I would prefer wise city, for example, instead of smart. With new technologies, we are knowing how intelligence is not the same as awareness or conscience. Our devices, our algorithm can think much faster, but they cannot have this feeling that we have as human beings this awareness, this ability of feeling. And I think that if we were looking for a wise city and not just a smart city, we would be working much more on the two main problems that cities have today, for me, which are really very simple. We have a problem of inequality, of opportunities and incomes and abilities of participate in the commons of the city, on the one hand. And then we have a huge problem with the legacy that we are passing towards new generations, climate change, sustainability, ecological stuff. So, and here is where I don't agree with you. We could say that we have stupid cities, and stupid cities are those who are not tackling with these two big issues, inequality and lack of sustainability. And we cannot say yet that smart cities are different of these stupid cities which are not tackling with those issues. So we should push smart cities towards this model of wise cities which really address these issues.
Morell?
Well, I can't really defend the use of smart cities. It's not something that I identify with. I'm here and I'm proud to be part of a Sharing Cities Alliance and Summit. And I think on the subject of smart city versus dumb city, I think you have to be aspirational. And whether you use terms to use that, I think that's one way. But the qualities of sharing cities are sharing the benefits, sharing accountability, sharing stakeholders. And I think that's, they're values that I think we should either already have or aspire to as well. And so I think questions like that are more important rather than being smart or dumb. I think we should all be sharing the benefits of technology, of new processes, and I think that's more important.
Thanks. Mayo?
So I would refer to the sharing cities as a framework in the sense of and the results of the Sharing City Summit resulting in a declaration about which are the principles that should be preserved in a sharing city. So 42 cities here in this during this Smart City Congress that we were here has agreed on which are the 10 principles that should be present in order for being a sharing city. And these principles have to do with preservation of working rights, preservation of the environment, being inclusive, the defense of the general interest, the defense of the city sovereignty, and I would encourage you very much to look into these 10 principles in order to what the cities has resulted as what actually a sharing city should be. But I would like to reflect on the question also on the basis of the Smart City World Expo Congress, actually. No? If we have to think what is a smart city, perhaps we can make the exercise of thinking what is the smart city on the basis of how this World Expo Congress happened, no? And in the history of this World Expo Congress, at the beginning there was only companies. So you have a smart city as companies providing technological solutions. But who established which are the problems to be solved? Who established which are the priorities, no? And who assure that there is preserve the common interest or that these impacts go well with the city, no? So then there was an innovation in the Smart City Congress Expo, and there was incorporated the cities, which it makes total sense. I mean, why a smart city without cities, it doesn't make any sense. So now there are 700 cities coming here. But I was thinking, a smart city with corporations, okay, providing solution, market is important, with city councils. Those are important. But a smart city without citizens does make sense. So in this direction, I would encourage the innovation of the Congress and the Smart City Expo into opening it into the citizens engagement. And this is what actually has happened this year with the case of an experimental stand, that it was the sharing stand, part of the Sharing City Summit, in which it has been an stand, which it was more kind of a lab. All the stand was thinking in terms of co-creation and participative modalities, and they were the actors from the for elites, in the sense of it was foundations, regular citizens, and actors that normally they are not here present in the smart city. And the whole stand is not only a lab, because it's participative modality and favoring the networking instead of selling a product. You were not there to buy a product, but you were there to inject with others in order to find solutions and create common actions. And all the knowledge of the stand about the streaming of all the talks, the information of the exhibition or the design is open access, open source. It's based on open knowledge and creating a knowledge commons. No? And here I refer to commons as Eleanor Ostrom, Nobel Prize, first woman winning the Economic Nobel Prize, pointed about the commons as a mode of production that sometimes is much more efficient. No? So I'm referring as this kind of commons tradition. So I would suggest that the smart city, if we follow the experience of the sharing stand, would move into a market, yes, city council, yes, citizens, and I would, as I am a researcher, I would make sure there are also research there, and with that we might have a good set of, with also the quadruple elite, in order to rethink about what a smart city might be.
Thanks. We have to finish the session, but if you have a very quick, short answer, Samir?
Yes, I would say that a smart city is just a catchy brand that we are resignifying with changing its significance with time. So what it meant in the beginning, it's true that it was constrained to mostly digitalization. Today we are seeing it in this Congress, how it has incorporated sustainability or inclusiveness as core concepts, not only in the Sharing Cities stand, but as values to be part of this core concept. And hopefully we can keep making it evolve.
Well, thanks to the four of you. Thank you to everyone who stayed in the room until the very last minute of our final session to conclude the Smart City Expo World Congress in this year, and we hope to see you all next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vera, and all of the panel. Once again, just to echo what Vera just said, thank you so much for being here at the Smart City Expo World Congress 2018. We've had over 21,331 visitors, 844 exhibitors, sorry, 700 cities from 146 countries, and more than 400 speakers. So please give a massive round of applause to everyone involved. It's been an incredible 3 days. Thank you for being here. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've networked. We hope you've had a great time. And we'll see you next year. Thank you very much.